I want to make a new video, one that'll make up for my overall lack of activity lately. What kind of thing is popular nowadays? What is Zoomers like? Let's see. Pointless videos and tier lists. Pointless tier list! My first tier list. No, really, I've never done this before. Well, the only logical way of getting this going is to go by alphabetical order, I guess. Starting with Alabama. Alabama. I like intentionally mispronouncing things sometimes. I have another extremely pointless video all about that. Anyway, it's hard to properly grade these until we've actually seen them all, but we're not off to a promising start here. I mean, Limestone County, Lawrence County, Coleman, Jefferson, those are not squares. I really don't see a whole lot of square counties here at all. Let's see, what's the closest thing we have to a square even? Like, Coffee. Geneva's it's a rectangle, but at least it's, 4 right angles. But yeah, bad start. I'm gonna put it in D tier. At least it was trying to stay relatively symmetrical, in terms of not making too many counties way longer than they are wide. But yeah, they're not squares. Next up is Alaska, whose flag represents the Big Dipper and Polaris, probably just because they're so far north. Picturing the shape of Alaska, I don't have a lot of faith in them on this list. Oh, they don't even call them counties, they call them boroughs. And, yeah, they're not squares. They're not even close. Look, it ain't your fault, but it is what it is. E. Why do I act like any of this is anyone's fault? It's just the delineation of subunits. Not even subunits, like, these are subunits of subunits. Anyway, Arizona. Wow, seriously? All that land and that's all the counties you have to show for it? I mean, I like the fact that they're named after these Native American tribes, and those same tribes are also formations within the Grand Canyon system, but for this purpose, like, bro, you're gonna take your E and like it. Arkansas. Or Arkansas, whichever you prefer. I genuinely don't care. Well, at least these are like actual counties, including an Arkansas County, Arkansas. Okay, that's a thing. Well, this is a bit better. Obviously, the eastern border is made up by the Mississippi River, so that doesn't do you any favors. I do like the fact that the Little River County is on the border with the Rio Grande. That's kind of cute because, hey, the other river in the state is the Mississippi River. That's way bigger. Again, we've got counties that are pretty symmetrical, and they're slightly squarer than before, so this is the best one so far. Definitely C tier, and I might even move it up if we don't start improving any further. California is next. I love that state. I spent the first 26 years of my life in it, but again, picturing the shape of it, this is probably not going to fare well. Yeah, I'm afraid my fears were indeed realized. This is... I mean, well, it makes sense from a practical perspective. Of course, there's a lot more people living by the ocean than there are by the arid inlands, so the sizes make sense. But for the purposes of this list, this is awful. I remind you that the concept behind this video is intended to be as pointless as possible. In no way are these actual legitimate critiques. I'm going to put it in D. It could be E, but after seeing the relatively nonsensical arrangement of what Alaska and Arizona do with their counties, at least California is slightly above that. Alright, next up, Colorado. That state's just a rectangle. I have hope for this one. Well, the Rocky Mountains are bound to complicate matters a little bit. You see on the east side of the state where everything's much flatter, at least the counties are very rectangular. The actual Rocky Mountains, you can kind of tell where they are, just looking at the county map. Still, even the more square ones are clearly rectangles rather than squares. So, yeah, you had a chance to do better. So, you're going in C tier. Up next is Connecticut. Another rectangle with much fewer mountains. Also much less area in general, so there's probably not that many counties. Well, I was right about that. There's only 8 of them, and they are very not square. I mean, even with the ocean boundary being all squirrely like that, you still could have done a much better job than that, especially with the northern counties where that wasn't even a problem. At least they're relatively evenly spaced again, so D it is. Up next is Delaware. Are there even any counties in Delaware? That state's so small. Yeah, there's only 3. And they're not squares. But they kind of can't be. Come on, Delaware. Your big claim to fame is that you're the first state and you couldn't even master square counties. Because that's always the most important part of setting up a brand new nation. Alright, moving on to Florida, which is the least square state of them all. This is going to be painful. Oh, honestly not as bad as I was expecting. These counties actually at least make some effort to be visually acceptable. At least for what we're going for here. Especially Hardee and DeSoto counties. Those are impressively square. How are Florida counties more nice and symmetrical than Connecticut? I mean, it's not ideal, but for what they're given, that's actually not half bad. And hey, look, we formed a square of our own. 3 C's, 3 D's, 3 E's. Well, let's have somebody in B tier soon enough. Georgia, how about you? That's more like it. All right. They're not perfectly square by any means, like they're slanted, but the fact that they're slanted a bit doesn't really count as a demerit. They're still pretty well packed together. Like, it legit looks like someone trying to pack things together in an orderly fashion. They're not square, but I can at least appreciate that they seem to beat up with each other. Like, there's a lot of perpendicular boundaries, like Twiggs, Wilkinson, Bleckley, and Lawrence. Like, there's these nice little 4 corners moments. There's 3 corners between Morgan, Jasper, and Putnam. Like, this is definitely the closest so far to being perfectly orderly. Okay, yeah, that, like, tall finger was bound to be a pretty big issue there. And yeah, it doesn't get much better down there, I'm afraid. I mean, most of them are curved, and I don't even really see anything that would be classified as a rectangle. This is kind of like California, like it's D- or E+. I'm gonna go E+ on this one. Alright, Illinois. Oh, hey, that's something. Looks pretty well packed together. Kendall and Grundy counties are pretty much squares. Knox is a rectangle, but, you know, mostly squares. You can obviously tell that there are some river boundaries. You know, that'll happen there. But for those that don't have a river boundary, they're looking pretty good, actually. I mean, the state itself is shaped all bizarrely, so to have this many nice square counties is honestly very impressive. I think with that consideration, I'm gonna have to say this is the best one so far. I mean, just with the rules of nature, you can't expect every single county to be square. That's just, like, impossible unless the state's completely flat, so I'm gonna say that belongs in A tier, especially considering the shape of the state. Alright, Indiana, let's see how you do. Nice! Very nice. It's a little easier for Indiana because their state's not shaped so crazy, because remember, Illinois has the Mississippi River to contend with once again. But Indiana looking good here. They are all, like, nice and polygonal and symmetrical. There's a little bit of river stuff going on with Warren County and Vermilion County, but most of it is pretty good. There's some curves, there's some rivers, and I wouldn't call these like squares. They're clearly rectangles, but nice and consistent. Definitely A tier. Close to S, but there weren't enough like actual squares for it to be S. All right, Iowa, aka France with an eagle on it, apparently. Oh. Oh, wow. It's beautiful. Even with the Mississippi River on the east, if we ignore those counties, look at it. They're all the same size. They're all symmetrical. The only thing that could possibly make this better is if there were more four-corner intersections, but again, that's just the nature of being surrounded by big rivers. Apart from that, that's like perfect. You see, that's why I made this list, because I figured there were some states out there that really, really wanted to make a bunch of squares. Iowa, congratulations. Let's see if Kansas can keep up the good work. I just noticed, by the way, we are entering the realm of a crap load of blue flags with just some different decorations on them. Apparently the US ran out of creative ideas for state flags around the K mark. Yes, I know the US did not come up with their flags in alphabetical order. I'm not that dumb. Kansas absolutely can keep up the good work. My goodness. Let's see, Morton County, Comanche County, Comanche, I don't know. Wilson, Bourbon, Lynn, those all look like pretty much perfect squares. Even the ones that aren't perfect squares aren't terribly far off, except for like Finney County. Geary, Riley, Potawatomi. But the fact that there's so few of them that we can actually name and shame them is pretty impressive. A tier or S tier? I'm gonna go A just because Kansas is a relatively flat rectangular state and there were a couple of counties that seemingly didn't have to have weird squiggly boundaries, so yeah, A. Alright, up next, yet another state in America's heartland, Kentucky, although this one's surrounded by a bunch of weird river boundaries too. Yeah, alright, the good times are kind of ending. But, again, that's to be expected of a state that just has the wonkiest borders. It is what it is. It's not as bad as it could have been. But, yeah, none of these are rectangles. They're at least consistent in terms of size, so again, at least it's not E tier. But legitimate excuses or not, I'm afraid you're in D. Right. At least Louisiana, we can tell, is Louisiana because of the pelican. That's a nice representative flag. Oh god, am I starting to critique the flags as well as the counties? Flags are rectangles too, you know. Yeah, that's about what I expected, again with wonky borders, particularly with the Mississippi River. Not terrible. There's some counties that are kind of close to being square-ish. They're far from what we're looking for, but considering this is the state with the delta of one of the busiest rivers on planet Earth, I think I can put it in, like, I don't know, C- here. Could be D, but whatever. I'll be generous. Alright, next up. Maine. Some might call it Maine, and oh my god. No, you're Maine. You suck at making squares. It's a good thing snow comes in ball form, huh? Alright, next up was the state with the unmistakable flag, Maryland. And yeah, this is just another state that absolutely never stood a chance. I'm sorry that I said Florida had the most unsquare shape out of any state. I think Maryland actually has it beat. It's kind of cute that Baltimore City gets its own little representative there. Yep, E. Oh crap, do I have to shrink the screen now? Oh wait, I can just zoom out on the webpage. Boom. Massachusetts. Very important state in the history of this country, but I sometimes forget how small it actually is. And yeah, that's no good. Another state that unceremoniously never really had much of a chance on this list. Up next, another blue flag representing Michigan. Another state that has virtually no... Oh my god! Okay, that northern, smaller part of Michigan never had a chance, but the main part is almost perfect. Look at that. There are multiple perfect four-corner intersections between these counties. I mean, I live in Ohio now, so I don't take any pleasure in admitting this, but for the shape of the land they're given, that is S-worthy. It really is. Alrighty, on to Minnesota, the wild home of the Viking and other sports teams. Okay, again we have bizarre state boundaries, and you know the far north of Minnesota is pretty inhospitable, so those counties are going to be larger. But where it's more reasonable, it's more reasonable. We got some nice four-corner intersections: Grant, Douglas, Stevens, Pope, and then the lower left. So parts of the state are pretty much perfectly square counties, and then some parts aren't, but I can respect the effort. It's pretty good. Still, there's some monstrosities like Polk County in the northwest there that prevent me from making this A tier. Besides, I think Georgia's getting kind of lonely. Alright, Mississippi up next. Not too bad. They're not using the Mississippi River itself as an excuse to make unsquare counties. There's some slight monstrosities here and there, but again, we have nice squares and four-corner boundaries between some of the ones, especially in the east. So, again, part of the state is really nice and square, part of it isn't. An admirable effort was made, and it belongs in B tier. Again, why am I acting like any effort was made specifically to make the counties square? Oh yeah, because I'm an idiot. Up next, the Netherlands. Wait, no, Missouri, sorry. Yeah, that's pretty good. We got mostly squarish, rectangular stuff going on throughout the state, despite, of course, this being Missouri. The Missouri River is huge. We again have St. Louis City represented by its own little mini county. That's pretty good work. There's a Texas County, Missouri. Why is that amusing to me? It seemed like where they could make a more rectangular square county, they did. I would call that A tier. Maybe like A minus-ish, but still good. Alright, up next, Montana. Alright, that's a bit of a mess. Of course, Montana has some very interesting topography going on as well, but I would still expect more than one county to be square-ish shaped. Wheatland is really the only one that fits that criteria. Not quite among the worst we've seen, but it's definitely D tier. Up next, the incredibly flat Nebraska. Alright now, no excuses. Okay, good. Good job, Nebraska. You can see the Platte River does kind of screw around with the eastern side. But again, where they could make them square, it seems like they did. So, no complaints here. Other than the fact that there are some that are just larger than the others. But even the ones that are big are pretty squarish. Easy A. Alright, up next, the blue state. Nevada. Because, yeah, the first color I think of when I think of the state of Nevada is friggin' blue. It's a mountainous desert, and there's not a whole lot of humans living in it. Yeah, that's pretty much to be expected. Although, I will say, as far as a giant desert, there are at least a few pieces of effort made into making a couple of the counties look kind of... You know what? Nah, I'm being too generous. Try to justify putting it in C tier, but nah, it's a D. Alright, now it's out with the old and in with the new. The 4 new states, starting with New Hampshire. And it sucks. But it's a small and misshapen state, so again, it never really had that much of a chance to begin with. It's just the nature of the beast. Alright, New Jersey now. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of squares here either, but again, it's a small and misshapen state. Yeah. What are you gonna do? Alright, New Mexico. We don't need a New Mexico. The old Mexico is doing just fine. Anyway. Not bad, not bad. Again, it's a deserty state with relatively sparse populations, but it's certainly doing a better job than Nevada when it comes to keeping things mostly in a square pattern. I can't really say that any of these are squares, or even really rectangles, but at the very least they're mostly straight lines. I'd say that's C+. Yeah, that sounds about right. And the last new state is, of course, New York, which, despite its extreme importance, isn't actually that big in terms of area size, but it does do a pretty good job here, at least as far as the topography and the size and the shape of the state. We still don't really see much of a networking of different counties kind of forming a nice orderly system, but at least most of them are symmetrical with one another. Yeah, let's go ahead and C tier as well. Alright. North Carolina. North Carolina? Mixed bag if I ever did see one. I mean, you stare right in the middle of it, you got Randolph and Guilford counties, which are almost perfect squares. Then, it's a little swirly everywhere else. At least the size is relatively consistent. We're on a C roll, aren't we? Shrink the screen. Alright, North Dakota now. Let's see what you got. Alright, respectable. There's a lot of these counties with this inexplicable slight horizontal shift to them. It's all in the same latitude, like Burleigh, Kidder, Stutzman. I don't really see where that's coming from, but it's mostly alright. Solid B-. Next up is Ohio. Oh, crap. This is the one state in the U.S. where the flag isn't even a rectangle. How can we expect the counties to be rectangular? Okay, that's not as bad as I was fearing. Again, not really square, but relatively symmetrical. Of course, the Ohio River will put her branch in any of those plans, but once you get out of those counties, there's not really any shapes that are too outrageous. Morrow County is a little out there, but not too bad. Unfortunately, it is confirmed that Michigan is better than Ohio. At least in that silly regard. Alright, home stretch now. Oklahoma. Hey, you know what? With the whole panhandle thing up in the northwest, I'm pretty pleased that they actually covered that in just 3 rectangular counties. That alone is praiseworthy. And again, we got some rivers kind of screwing with the overall geometry here. But again, for the most part, where they could make them rectangular, they did, except for whatever the heck Tulsa is. But that is another solid B. Up next, Oregon. Ooh, yeah, those are weird. Those are kind of weird. D. Alright, another very important state in the U.S., Pennsylvania. And, oh, that's right, we've got the Allegheny. Yeah, here's another state that was dealt a bad hand. Seemingly it should be fine because the whole state's pretty rectangular, but yeah, the Alleghenies are not to be trifled with in terms of delineating things. Not too bad, but I really can't consider anything to be like exactly squarish. All considered, that's a pretty solid C. Alright. Again, Rhode Island is next, and that might not even have any counties whatsoever. Let's check it out. It does, but this is pretty much an NA situation here. Still, they're actually technically slightly more rectangular than some of the other tiny states we've seen. You know what? Heck, you can be in D tier. Right, South Carolina next, another pretty distinctive flag. Okay, I have to say, aesthetically, I like the way these counties are shaped. It seems like they're going along really well with the overall shape of the state. But for the purposes of this list, this is not what we want. I don't think any of these can be considered square. They're not really polygonal. They just happen to tessellate, which is why I kind of enjoy looking at them. But for this list, it gets a D. South Dakota, one of my favorite states. And no, not because of Mount Rushmore, the Badlands. Really should check that out if you have a chance. And we have another case here of where they could make the counties relatively rectangular. They did. And then when they couldn't, obviously, they couldn't. Not much here we haven't already seen. I'll just go ahead and put it in B tier. Alright, Tennessee, whose flag reminds me of something, but I'm just not sure what that something is. You ever have that feeling where you're just like reminded of something, but you can't put your finger on it? Well, of course you have that feeling. That's like a universal human thing. Anyway. We have another one here where at the least they're mostly symmetrical, similar size, but very few of them are actual rectangles. Oh well. That's like D+, I'd say. Alright, up next. Chile! I mean Texas. Chile is like my dream country. And I already have earthquake training from living in Southern California. Well, this was bound to be an interesting map because Texas is such a huge state. We have different sections of Texas that behave completely differently. A good chunk of it is like perfect square, absolutely perfect square. But then we've got some parts of it probably influenced by the Rio Grande, among other things. I just realized that river on the Arkansas-Texas border was not the Rio Grande, it's the one between Texas and Mexico. Some geology degree holder I am. Whatever, this is just an aesthetic study of county shapes, and I can safely say that Texas is one of the best we've seen. The fact that they slant on the eastern side, but still tessellate is really cool, and I really do enjoy that, and I'm not going to mark that against them. Definitely A tier. On to my favorite state, even though I've never lived in it, Utah. 3 words. Zion National Park. Anywho, this is a bit disappointing. Like, half of these counties just look like the state of Tennessee. D. On to Vermont, another small, misshapen state. A very familiar syndrome is developing here. Yeah, none of these are even close. E. Okay, Virginia, again, deals with the Allegheny and, well, just the Appalachian Mountains in general. And it's not completely screwed up. It's also got the Chesapeake Bay, of course, on the east. But, like, what is with all these tiny mini counties in between all of the... Ugh. D. Washington! It's got Cascade volcanoes to worry about. As well as the Puget Sound, Pacific Ocean, and... yeah, those aren't squares. D. Now on to West Virginia, a place many people think they belong. Somebody should really make a song about that. And again, we have a small state with a really weird appearance that again deals with some of the Appalachian Mountains. Considering all that, this honestly could have turned out a lot worse for them. I mean, those aren't squares, but I mean, look at the shape of the state. Just the fact that they're even relatively symmetrical with one another is pretty close to miraculous. All that in mind, it's kind of D plus, C minus, but with that in mind, we gotta put that in C. Wisconsin, everybody's favorite cheese haven, and not too bad. Not too bad. Not crazy good in terms of squaring everything, but that works. I don't know why Racine and Kenosha were split into two, but apart from that, nothing really jumps out. Oh wait, Pepin. What is that doing here? Well, we've got a couple of nice four corner spots, so yeah, this is pretty good. And last but not least, Wyoming, another state that's pretty much just a perfect rectangle. And they could have done better, but they could have done worse. I'm certainly not impressed, considering the state is a big rectangle, and there is the issue of sparse population, but the whole damn state's sparsely populated. C minus. And there it is. There's my first ever tier list. And it's completely pointless. I hope you enjoyed it. I like how there's room to debate between two ranks, even though there shouldn't be any subjectivity in this. I picked the most objective category possible. Weird. Yeah, just trust the guy with Asperger's syndrome to choose a super objective study. But it is kind of funny how there's still a little room for debate there, even in what shouldn't even be a debatable study. Huh. There was a lesson to milk out of this after all. Oh, maybe I learned something. Did you learn something? If you did, I'm impressed.